Can Apple become the Netflix of news, games, and entertainment? And is Huawei's new P30 smartphone an Apple and Samsung slayer? Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Netcom, taking Australian technology to the global market. Welcome to Vertical Hold, Behind the Tech News, where we talk to Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined as always by Alex Kidman, a man who brought home the goods at last week's Australian Tech Journalism Awards, winning the best technical journalist because he's good at explaining stuff. Congratulations to Alex. He isn't in the Vertical Hold studio this week. Instead, he's on the ground in Paris at the Huawei P30 launch, and we'll hear from him a bit later in the show. First up, we're going to skip the news and jump straight into all things Apple, which finally lifted the wraps on its new subscription video service and a ton of other things this week. To do that, we're joined by two great guests. First, we've got News Corp National Tech Editor and Gadget Guru, Jen Dudley Nicholson. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
We're also joined once again by Decider TV media commentator and the king of late night television, Steve Malk. Steve, welcome back to the show.
Don't go changing.
So, Apple announced a whole lot of hardware updates last week to clear the decks before the big service announcements this week. There's a lot to cover, but we'll jump in with the new Apple TV app and Apple TV Plus streaming service. Steve, what did Apple put on the table, and is it worth getting excited about?
Yes and no. I mean, at the core of it, they've given us an update or an all-new Apple TV app. And what we are learning with Apple is that they've moved away from the iSnack 2.0 naming mechanism, and now it's about Snack Plus, where we just get to brand things like that. So Apple TV will be an app that is available on, of course, all your Apple platforms, but interestingly, one that will extend into smart TVs and other kinds of streaming devices. And that's your portal. That's where you'll go to get Apple content. Plus, if you've got, as we know so far from an American point of view, HBO, Showtime, Stars, those kinds of subscriptions, you'll be able to sign into them within the context of that app and get all of that content available there in one place. The Apple TV Plus streaming service is their portion of that portal, and that's where they're going to be delivering not only their own original content, but of course other content that they've bought in or partnered to get made.
So they had the big guns out at the launch. They had Oprah, they had Spielberg. Are they actually making anything worth getting excited about, enough to hand over for, well, we don't know how much. I assume at least another $15 a month.
Look, I'm going to say, if you are launching any kind of media TV streaming service, show some bloody clips. Don't just roll out the talent. Give us a hint as to what this content is. It's not like, you signed M. Night Shyamalan yesterday. You would have had some stuff in development. Get it in development earlier.
Yeah. So, Jen, what do you want to see from this streaming service from Apple?
I want to see detail. I'm not used to all of this, like I'm used to by the way, we've got one more thing and this is fully formed and it's been in development for 5 years, but you only just found out about it. And it comes in 3 different shades of red, and this is the price of it, and you probably can't afford it, so start saving your money now because it's about to come out in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And with this one, like
Apple,
exactly, we don't really have a price for it. We don't know exactly when it's coming out. Apparently the app is coming out in May, but we don't know exactly when it's coming to Australia. And we don't know in particular what shows were on it. Although I'm super impressed with this whole, like, the morning show business that they mentioned. It'll have Jennifer Aniston and Steve Carell, because anything that Michael Scott could be in, comedy wise, I'm totally supportive of. But I'd like to know how much I want to pay for that.
You're bang on, Jen, and I'm going to jump in here because I think this is the key thing. Apple are an amazing tech company. Apple do pretty great OS and all of those sorts of things. Where they've dropped the ball on this is that they've given us a pitch meeting. Here's the kinds of stories we're going to deliver. Sorry, fellas. Like, what we needed to see was evidence of the kinds of things that are coming and pricing. Oh my God. How can you not come to market and tell us how much it's going to cost now?
It's not going to look nearly as good in Australia, is it?
I can't imagine that it will. I mean, we know that from an Australian context, we've got Netflix, which is an Australian variant of the Netflix library. We've got Stan, which is uh, an excellent library, but one that is hodgepodged of their own stuff. Showtime, CBS All Access, a whole bunch of other things, Disney content. And I know that Nine were over there pitching to Disney to basically say, "Hey, when you launch, let Stan be your Disney Plus platform in Australia." That would be huge.
Mm.
Amazon are having a swing, trying to be Amazon, doing Amazon-y things. You've got Hey You. If you know what that is, then you're probably not listening to this podcast. Um, those lines of ideas. The only reason you're going to want Apple Plus is because you're interested in the morning show idea, or you want to see what Spielberg's delivering, or Ron Howard, or Kamal, Nanjiani. All great, content makers in their own right, but give us something.
But Jen, we're not going to get our HBO fix here. You're not going to be able to watch Game of Thrones through Apple TV Plus in Australia, are you?
No, well, it's interesting the way they're kind of packaging it, because it seems to be that they're suggesting that you could subscribe to this Apple content and then put additional packages onto the side of that to subscribe to others. So presumably in Australia, we just won't be able to access some of those others, because in Australia, HBO isn't the only one that you're not allowed to subscribe to individually, because that all
Yeah.
comes down to the mega deals that all of the big companies do, and that's not going to change. I don't think, in this amazing streaming environment, we still haven't got to this place that Steve Jobs kind of hinted at before he died, that, we would be able to access all of the TV all of the time from one device, and one device to rule them all. That would be lovely. And we're still kind of like making our way there. And look, I'm not sure this is a step towards it. I would like it if it was, but I think that we're still going to spend ages trying to work out, okay, look, I want to watch this show, but which device is this show on, and what can I access it from, and what sort of streaming mechanism, and is my broadband up to that at the moment, and all of these different factors when you just want to watch one show.
Can I say I actually think that we might be able to get Game of Thrones in this? And bear with
Yeah.
me. I mean, in that, Foxtel have announced KO, it's to market already. Their sport, subscription delivery internet video service is going and going well. And the word on the street, you can certainly correct me, Jen, is that Foxtel are coming to market with effectively a drama version, an entertainment version of KO in the same way, and that Foxtel now might not be what we have today, or it might even cease to be. That if you want to get it, you get, the entertainment version of KO. So if that becomes the case, if it's a subscription video service, there's no reason why in Australia, Apple and Fox wouldn't go, let's talk about this. News Corp wouldn't say, so we want to get our app as a subscription thing like HBO Now into Apple TV, so that when you sign in, you can sign into your KO subscription and watch Apple stuff as well as you can watch the F1, the AFL, and Game of Thrones and all of that other HBO content via your whatever they're going to call it subscription.
But Foxtel doesn't really play well with others, though.
No, they
Can't see
don't.
them.
But that's
No.
been their history.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is, I mean, KO is a pretty amazing product, and I'd expect that we're going to see more of that. It wouldn't even surprise me to see those services start to pop up, on things like Fetch TV and those sorts of things as just windows into their service.
Yeah. So, Jen, there was talk of a little, like an Apple Chromecast streaming dongle, so you didn't have to drop a few $100 on an Apple TV or a few $1,000 on a new smart TV. Did you expect to see that? Were you surprised it didn't come out?
No, I fully expected them to say go and buy an Apple TV because it's out there and
That's
this is
very
our
Apple.
device, and we only exactly, and we only launched this a moment ago. I think that it's interesting to me that they're going to make it available more broadly on smart TVs, and even the Samsung smart TV, which very much feels like crossing the streams to me. But yeah, I mean, they're not entirely locking people in with this, which is really interesting and kind of plays into that, we want to beat Netflix mentality. I'm not sure how many Android users are going to subscribe to it, but maybe if you really want to see Steve Carell in something else and you don't want to watch The Office again and again, maybe you'll do it. I think they really wanted to separate this launch from hardware, though, and that's why we saw Tim Cook drive me absolutely bonkers last week with just like 11:30 p.m. Here's a new gadget. By the way, I tweeted it, which was just it was unusual behavior, and it was very unusual behavior for Apple.
Yeah.
But I really think that was just a method of getting the hardware away from the services and sort of splitting everything up for people.
Yeah. So one of the other things that they talked about is a news subscription service. Now, again, a bit like the TV, Apple has had a news app for a while. It started off slow. They're now sort of transforming it into something a bit more advanced. Jen, what are they talking about, and is it good news for publishers?
It's really hard to tell at this point because, again, it would have been nice to have some extra detail. And there's been some contradictory information from what I've seen. So, the basic idea, as I understand it, is that you'd pay this nominal fee, which, $10 in the US, goodness knows what in Australia. And you'd be able to access content from a lot of different publishers. And a lot of it has been magazines content. The Wall Street Journal was one of the news organizations, pure news organizations that signed up to this. But it's like, even though Apple kind of promoted it as, you'll be able to access your news for this one fee that will get you in the gate. I understand that Wall Street Journal has been saying, well, it's actually not all of the freshest news, but maybe, day old news. So, I mean, in terms of magazine subscriptions, that's not so bad because,
Yeah,
your
not so bad with
magazine,
magazines.
you'll have it hanging around there for a month. It doesn't matter. Maybe you want to, if you're into photography magazines, for example, like my iPad is full of, maybe you want to go back and you want to read past issues because there's something you missed, and that sort of material is almost timeless. um, I think it'll be interesting to see whether people take this up as well, because I mean, potentially, if you're a big reader, this is a great deal. In terms of publishers, I don't know how it's going to work from like a straight sort of daily news piece and a news perspective, because
Yeah.
you see, like the New York Times, they're making lots of money now from subscriptions and worldwide subscriptions, and boosting their newsroom and being able to do more investigations now because they can sell subscriptions. But they probably don't want to carve up some of that revenue and cut it in half and give it to Apple, because my goodness, I don't want to.
Yeah, 50% is a damn big slice. And I would have
Yeah.
thought at this time, with what we've got with newspapers and their online content, they're mostly starting to get their digital subscriptions sorted out, because it's kind of sink or swim. If you haven't got that sorted out by now, you're in real trouble. If you have got that sorted out, then you're starting to turn it around. So, do you really need Apple's help and give them half the money? Have they missed the boat a bit here?
It does seem like a bit late in the piece, because when you
Yeah.
think about when the Australian, put up their paywall and locked their content down, that was a fair while ago now.
Mm.
And then to be handing Apple 50% of the revenue, it doesn't feel like you're making great strides. But it'll be interesting for this reason, though, because Apple has an absolute shed load of followers. So their finance guy was quoted on a call recently saying that they would have 500 million people paying them for services by next year,
Jesus.
which that's quite a few. And
Yeah.
like, some of that might be, I mean, when they say services, that could be anything from Apple Music
The
to,
iCloud.
people, well, exactly, or people like storing their photos, because it's not like you're ever going to have fewer photos, and hopefully you don't wipe them all out. It
Mm.
can be a range of services.
Mm.
But if you talk about even a percentage of that 500 million people, and then you get them to subscribe, and you get, a share of the revenue from that subscription, even if you cut it in half, maybe it's still an absolute load, because Apple tends to make a lot of money. So I think a lot of people will be playing kind of a wait and see approach to see how many people really want to subscribe to something like this. But I don't think in its current form that it's fully formed in terms of news subscriptions. I'm keen to see it, though. I really want to try it.
So this really seemed to be Apple having a crack at everything here, and I'm just going to pretty much brush over this one. But they also launched a game subscription service, so they want to take on your Steams of the world. I don't know how they'll have any luck there, because I think serious gamers would probably want a game on a console or a PC, and if you're a casual gamer on a smartphone, you're probably used to getting your free, buy the content and the game sort of content. I couldn't see you handing over 10 or 15 bucks a month, but just, in interest of time to move past that, Apple credit card. Now, does that reek of desperation, or is that a stroke of genius?
Apple Magnesis.
Yes. Why would I want a credit card from it? Was bad enough talk of an Apple TV and letting like a actual television. There's no way I want a television from Apple. They put glue in the HDMI ports so I couldn't use anything else. But
Yeah.
why would I want an Apple credit card? Jen, why would I want to give Apple control over all of that?
I have no idea.
So
No,
it's not just
um,
me. That's crazy.
I just thought that this was one of those ones where you went, "What? Like, have you
Yeah.
got so much money that you just think you can get into every service?"
Yeah.
Look, I'm sure that there's a reasoning behind it, and certainly Apple Pay works very well, and even the most reticent of Australian banks has finally come on board. I like the idea of like no late fees, and I like the idea of no annual fee.
Mm.
But this was just a bit out there for me, and I actually wonder though if we'll see this in Australia because this seems
No,
like
I
a
don't think
very
so.
American product. Because
Yeah.
in Australia we don't have the same problems as Americans do, where well among other things that with the magnetic strips, we're fully sort of gone over to contactless
Mm.
payment and
Yeah.
happy to pay with our phones or with Apple Pay that's actually saved to the device. I don't know if we need this.
So, Steve, has Apple bitten off more than they can chew here? It's not the first time Apple's been told to stick to their knitting, but are they trying to do too much here?
I just see no point in it. If
Yeah.
if your point of difference was that I can hold my phone up to the FPOS device and I've signed up with my bank, my credit card details are on that, and it automatically deducts it from my account in that transaction, why do I want to whip out a little flat piece of titanium and look like a complete dick?
Yeah. Or why would I want to attach that? I'm surprised they're even giving out physical cards. I thought they would just attach it to Apple Pay and it would just be a virtual credit card that meant you didn't have to rely on your bank supporting Apple Pay. That
I mean,
maybe makes more sense.
Billy McFarlane is in jail, right?
I believe so.
Like we're not going to see the Apple Fire Festival next year or something.
No, no. You never know, though. You never know. Credit goes a long way. Is this the
Gosh.
pivot moment for Apple where they switch that focus from hardware and software to services? It's been happening for a while, but when we look back on this as the pivotal moment where it all happened.
They definitely want that to happen, I think, and it's
Mm.
it's gotten to the point where smartphones cost a lot of money now, a lot more than they used to even.
Yeah.
We've got to the point where people are holding on to their phones and their devices in general for a lot longer.
Mm.
It's been a long time between laptop upgrades, and so
Yeah.
really this is Apple announcing we're definitely going into services. You are going to stay on your devices and we're going to make you, keep looking at your screens with all of these amazing services. It makes absolute sense. And I imagine that this was a pitch not as much to consumers as it was to sort of the financiers of the world saying,
Mm.
where Apple's going to stick around. We don't just have a big war chest of money. We're going to use it and we're going to make sure that people are looking at Apple products and Apple services for a long time to come.
Are they at risk of shooting themselves in the foot though? Because as iPhones and Macs get more expensive, they're losing customers. People are not buying them as often, or just going, you know what? I could save $500 or $1,000 and go Android or Windows, and they're pretty good these days. So, uh, does it make sense to switch the services when you're potentially driving away customers like that?
I think you'd be surprised that they're not necessarily losing customers as much as they're losing sales. People
Yeah,
are still
Yeah.
using their devices, but until they smash them, they're not really replacing them just because
Yeah.
it costs so much to do so. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it, Jen. I mean, in our family, we've got a family sharing setup. We are Apple Music subscribers, and we have, an increased iCloud subscription storage amount that's shared across all of us. So we're in. My wife and I still run iPhone 6s because we cannot afford the upgrade. My MacBook Pro is now 4.5, 5 years old. It needs the upgrade, but it's rocking on by itself pretty well right now. If you're going to move into services, then you absolutely have to, first of all, get rid of the you're in Australia Apple tax.
mm.
And then you have to roll back, at least start to minimize that you're buying Apple hardware tax. Because it's absolutely stopping sales. It is uh, slowing the return of the repeat customer.
Well, that was great. Thanks, Steve and Jen, for joining us and sharing your views on the Appleverse.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And now we'll see if we can through to Europe, see if we can get Alex on the line. Hello, Alex.
Thanks, Adam. So I'm here in Paris at the launch of the Huawei P30, and I have joining me from Picker, Lee Stark.
Hey.
And from Gizmodo, Tegan Jones.
Hey!
Now, this was an odd launch in that an awful lot had kind of leaked out about the phone beforehand, but there were still a few surprises in store, especially on that camera front, because they've done a few different things with the camera this time around, haven't they, Lee?
Yeah, it's not your standard camera. I mean, Huawei doesn't really dabble in whatever a standard camera would be. It's not its forte. It likes to push the boundaries there. This time you get you do get a long lens. There's a 5x telephoto lens, which is a really cool feature. It has a neat little pentaprism, which gives this really quite cool optical illusion that the sensor is hidden deep in the camera, or in the phone rather. But the most interesting part for me is actually the sensor technology. Everyone should know that sensor makes a big part of obviously what the camera is going to do. A better sensor is going to produce better images. On this one, the sensor is of a different design, which essentially means in this one, all sensors capture the colors that you can see, most likely down to something like red, green, and blue. This captures red, yellow, and blue. And the reason they've put in yellow as opposed to, I think, green is because it can technically allow them to capture just a little bit more light. And that light brings a little bit more, I guess, dynamics to the picture. I think this is my opinion more than what I've actually seen from their tech team on this. That may actually allow them to at least counter for the fact that they're not using the monochrome sensors anymore, give them a little bit more detail in their shots. And certainly from what we're seeing from the tests, that definitely seems to be the case, because now they've got this ultra-wide, 0.6x zoom, which we're seeing Samsung do, we're seeing a lot of companies follow, and it can go all the way, it can get very close, but they've got that amazing sensor to really account for it as well.
Yeah, because the low light is the thing on this. Tegan, what's your experience been of shooting, in as much near darkness as Paris can manage?
Yeah, it's actually been great. I mean, one of the things, if anyone knows Huawei cameras, is that they're beautiful. Even just, you can take it and just use it in auto and point and click and you're going to be very happy. But if you do want to do a little bit more, such as shoot in low light, it's actually incredibly impressive and something that I've really come around on, much like the zoom. So I've been running around shooting the Louvre and various things, and especially when you compare it to just auto mode, the amount of detail that it's picking up and just how much it's actually lightening without having to use a flash is incredibly impressive.
I was going to say, the low light is also quite remarkable from another point of view. Yes, it's good to have a low light camera. This thing can practically see in the dark. We've been in taxis on the way back from restaurants, and I know our eyes can register each other in the dark, but the camera's been able to fire and has a maximum ISO of 409,600. That's just a number to most people. It doesn't mean anything. It's technically like several stops higher than last year's 102,000, but it's just a number. What that actually means is it can basically see in the dark. The camera can do things that your eyes may not be able to adjust to, and so you get these shots of things in ridiculously low light that your eyes won't be able to see, that for the first time a phone camera can do. And normally you'd have to spend thousands of dollars on this sort of thing to get a mirrorless camera that could do anything like this. And this can do it, and it's sitting in your pocket. It is absolutely remarkable.
The post-processing in those super low-light situations can be a little unusual. I suppose in the interest of disclosure, I should say that we're here as guests of Huawei. But
absolutely.
Last week I was also up in the Northern Territory playing with this camera in the middle of the desert, and the pickup that it had was extraordinary because it was totally dark, but I could shoot things that looked like they were daylight, but for the fact that there's this moon and stars in the sky that you can see.
Absolutely.
And some of the ways that it did colour interpretations remind me sort of what the Pixel does, where it tries to estimate what things should look like, and some of the images are amazing, some of them are a little trippy.
There are things you learn from low light photography, especially if you do things like infrared photography. It's a really interesting area to kind of mess with. And you learn that white balance specifically kind of goes out the window when too much light in a low light situation needs to be interpreted. So you get things like purple fringing, which is actually also normal for a sensor to overheat. This has a cooling system to kind of help account for that. But there's only so much it can really do. I remember when I white balance infrared, you tend to get these really unnatural pinks and whites because you're accounting for what infrared does. This, I don't think it's doing the exact same thing, but I see what you mean. And part of that is attributed to the night mode. So night mode, which is distinct from standard capture, is actually a bracketing mode. For those who don't know, bracketing means you take a sequence of images and you merge them together, much like you do in high dynamic range images, HDR. This kind of does the same thing, but it's doing it with low light to account for it. So you're probably going to get a little bit more color than you might otherwise expect, and it has to be really sharp, so it's not great for people. It's great for landscapes. But as a result, you'll get these images that kind of pop off the page, off the screen, because the colors are a little bit more unnatural than you might expect. But it's not because the colors are unnatural, it's because that sensor is seeing a little bit more information than what you can see.
Cool. Now, it was ostensibly a phone launch, but not just a phone launch. Huawei had a few other things, but maybe not the things that everyone was expecting them to launch. When they launched some headphones, and that's fine, and then they launched some glasses, which are headphones.
Yeah, they sure are.
They sound like something else. We still think the Freelace... the Freelace are the
headphones.
They're the headphones. It's the name, the sort of thing you wouldn't normally think of with headphones.
No. Yeah, they were certainly interesting. I think that a lot of the things that they did announce, besides the phone itself, we're not even likely to see in Australia. So that made it really interesting. But I think we were maybe expecting something to do with 5G and saw and heard nothing about that.
They made that brief little mention of 5G is the future, which felt like every MWC keynote I think I've sat through in the last 3 years. And then they didn't return to it. I was genuinely quite surprised, because typically Huawei has these kind of this 6 months release cycle. In about 6 months from now, we can reasonably expect we'll see presumably the Mate 30. They can call it what they like, but it'll be Mate something. I'm surprised they're leaving it that late for their mainstream 5G phone. We know the Mate X, their foldable, is going to be 5G, ferociously expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they expect to sell about 3 of them. But no 5G P30 was a big surprise.
Especially when you consider the fact that Samsung does have a 5G version of its S10. But it's also a slightly different version with an extra camera. I mean, it's kind of got a camera setup more like what the P30 has. I was surprised they didn't have a P30 5G, but I'm getting the feeling that maybe leaving that for the Mate 30 5G will probably make more sense. I don't know.
Just within that kind of, the Mate is the professional phone.
Yeah, kind of, but also I can't work out what they would do in the next 6 months to make the P30 that dramatically different outside of a new Kirin processor. And let's be honest, we're kind of at the point where processing technology, it doesn't need to be much faster than what it is. Even the apps and games that are running on Android don't need that much to work with.
Fair enough. Tegan, tell me about how the P30 that I'm holding in my hand right now is going to help me break into Audis.
Yeah, so one of the things I did briefly mention is essentially a digital unlocking system for your car, but they also did mention that it will be able to be used for things like your house. So I believe there's going to be 7 different Audi cars that you'll be able to use this with across 20 countries, so you don't, have to carry around a traditional key fob or anything like that. It will just be able to...
That's so uncool.
I know. I mean, some people really love key fobs, especially when it comes to McLaren ones, weirdly enough. But yeah, so it essentially means that you'll be able to unlock your Audi car with your phone.
I'm trying to work out the massive utility beyond the I forgot my keys. That's an obvious. Sure. I forgot my keys. My phone can unlock my car. Great.
Yeah.
In that, presumably, I've got to pull the phone out of my pocket and do some kind of verification. Presumably, this is Bluetooth proximity, or it will. If not, you're doing Bluetooth proximity. But that means if I'm walking near enough that my car goes, oh, I can see Alex's phone, then, Fred the car thief can jump into my Audi and zoom off.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's not that different to a lot of newer cars now, where you can just have a proximity unlock if you happen to have the key fob. That's really no different to, a car thief can steal that and get into your car that way. But I do imagine that you would definitely want some sort of verification if it's on your phone, 100%. I
was of the impression, and you are far more car knowledgeable than I was, that most of those systems, though, at least had a button or a physical something, which obviously a phone, unless you did it off the power button or something, I don't know. I'm wondering about the logistics of how you make that happen and what your insurance company says to you when you say, my phone helped someone steal my car.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. They haven't shown us a lot about it yet, and I'm not entirely sure if Australia is going to be one of the 20 countries. I'd need to look into that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Volvo has a variant of this technology they announced last week, which is still key fob based, but it makes me wonder whether it'll be similar, whereby they can actually lock down the speed, the maximum speed of the car to a specific fob, so that when your kids take it, they can't actually break the law.
Yeah, that's true. Volvo's been doing stuff like that for a little while now, so you can have different profiles. I think other car companies do it as well. So again, you've got your kids on P plates or what have you, so it will reduce that speed. And also, Volvo did mention, I think, a few weeks back as well, that from 2020, I believe, they're going to be capping their speeds on all of their new cars anyway. Which, doesn't surprise me. It's Volvo. They're all about safety. So, yeah.
They're boxy, but they're good.
Exactly. So we're going to see a lot more of that kind of technology, I think, where you can, either lock the car down or reduce it to certain speeds. And whether this kind of tech will also play into it will be, super interesting to see.
I wonder how Huawei specific it is as well, because people change phone brands, and I don't want to spend all that money on a new car and then discover, wait a minute, I can't buy that new phone that I want because it won't work with my
Apple Watch of cars.
Yeah, yeah, you get locked into a certain brand that way. Yeah, I think you're right, and I actually hadn't thought about that. I would much rather see this technology as a third-party thing or as an app or something like that than locked into a specific manufacturer.
I feel like it will be an app.
Yeah.
I feel like this is just maybe a Huawei built app for their phones, because very little about NFC sort of stuff these days. I remember back in the day, everyone said you have to buy your phone in Australia to make it work for mobile payments. That's no longer necessarily the case.
True.
I mean, I feel the same. NFC is how you program the apps to make use of it that really define it. And I don't think whether you purchase a Huawei phone here or you purchase a Samsung phone, provided this app is on Android, I presume it should work with an Audi phone.
Yeah, you're gonna get some angry people otherwise.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, they did a bunch of demos on stage, and actually one of the more interesting things there was they named the phones they were doing the demo. It's usually quite brand X, and the general explanation I've always had for that was it was to avoid any legal quandaries if brand X came back and said, but you didn't test this fairly,
they're not scared of that this time.
They're not scared of that this time. And they also suggested all the different things. This phone has reverse wireless charging, which we saw in the Mate 20. It's in the S10 as well. I've always treated it as a bit of a gimmick. Like, it's there, but I've never just hit that situation where someone else's phone with wireless charging enabled has needed power, and I've definitively wanted to sit there without using my phone in any way, shape or form whatsoever for hours to let them have power.
And hours is the actual answer there. It
Absolutely.
takes forever. It takes like 20 minutes for 2%.
And then it takes so much more than it gives. Like, I have very strong opinions on reverse wireless technology, and I'm very much looking forward to trying it on the S10 Plus as well. But yeah, so I was coming into this news extremely skeptical, saying again, because I just do not see the point. But we did see some kind of fun things on stage.
Yeah, and you can charge. So we know you can charge headphones that support wireless charging, which there are precisely 2 at this point. Oh, 3, sorry. There's an Altec Lansing, there's a Huawei one, and there's obviously Apple's new AirPods 2, provided you get the external case. And you can charge toothbrushes as well. Makes toothbrushes have supported that cell charging for a long time, but we don't associate it with it because predominantly we use the external stands that they rely on. I tested that here. I've tested it now with the Mate 20 Pro and the P30 Pro, and I tested it with the S10 Plus last night, and yes, you can actually power your electric toothbrush on your phone, which is possibly the most useful version of the form for this technology.
Because you don't need much power to get a charge to clean your teeth with your electric toothbrush.
You don't, but the other side of it for me is that look, most of these external accessories are a pain to carry around from country to country, and if you're traveling for more than a week, chances are you are going to need to recharge your toothbrush. And now you can just leave your phone on there for a few minutes, stick it on top and get maybe 10 minutes of charge. In that 10 minutes, you could be having a shower. That seems like a really good use of your time.
Yeah.
Plus, all of those phones are water resistant, so if anything dribbles off your toothbrush, it's fine.
Totally
Maybe not covered by warranty. Technically not clean water, but
you're probably wrong a little bit on that, because the only water that it's technically rated for is fresh water, as opposed to like seawater, and so water from the tap, outside of your dribble of course, is actually fresh water.
So that just about wraps up this episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Tegan for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to Lee.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to you, the listener, for listening. As you know, we're on a huge push this year to get more people listening to the podcast, so please remember to leave a review on wherever you get your podcasting apps from. Send us some feedback via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
Vertical Hold is proudly sponsored by Netcom, taking Australian technology to the global market.
Eventually, Audacity will pick up bigger. People can lean into the mic, and then,
Right.
frankly, Adam can then sit there and work with audio magic. And yes, feel free to have it on top. Assorted
I
flavours.
love
They're all
assorted
sugar.
flavors. Sugar's my favorite flavor.
Sugar is my favorite flavor. How late did you guys go?
I don't know.
That good, eh?
Yeah.
Well, we know what Adam's going to stick at the end of that one.